Okay, so let's talk really quickly just about me. I joined the RCMP when I was 37 years old. I first got posted in Surrey for the first 7.5 years of my career. And I was telling the ladies at the start of this that it was a very exciting time for me. I loved it. I loved chasing bad guys. I mean, it was like I was in a Hollywood movie. It was crazy out there in Surrey. But we lived here in North Vancouver, and so I wanted to get transferred to North Vancouver. It took me 7.5 years to make that happen. So I was able to transfer in 2015 to North Vancouver, and I was a constable at the time. And so I promoted to a corporal. So the rank structure goes constable, corporal, sergeant, staff sergeant. And so I promoted in 2018 to a corporal. And then I was tapped on the shoulder and asked if I would head up the mental health team in 2009. I'm in my house here. I live in Lynn Valley. I've got 2 young boys. I am married, and we as a family love mountain biking in the North Shore trails and skiing. And yeah, we just love North Vancouver, and it's really near and dear to my heart, this community. And so to have the opportunity to serve the people that are my family and my neighbors and my peers here in North Vancouver has been an absolute honor. And I think the work that I'm doing has far more positive impact than when I was hiding in bushes and doing surveillance on bad guys, which there's not a lot of bad guys in North Vancouver. Yeah, so that's kind of a background. We'll go to the next slide and we'll talk about how the program developed. Just a technical glitch here. So I'll start talking about that slide deck if you guys can still hear me. The development of the mental health team. When I first joined the unit, we were called the Police Mental Health Intervention Unit, which is an absolute mouthful. And also, there's a lot of it caused some concerns for people with the Police Mental Health Intervention Unit. How are we intervening with mental health? And there was a lot of questions around that. And so I wanted to develop a program that was a little bit more inclusive, a little bit more less language to it, and a little bit simpler to understand. And so I started called it the Integrated Outreach Team. So it became the Integrated Outreach Team. Internally within the RCMP, it's still called the Police Mental Health Intervention Unit, but externally we're the Integrated Outreach Team. And it was always my desire and my focus to develop the program and bring on a CAR program, much like CAR 87 out of Vancouver. In CAR 87, they've got CAR 87 and CAR 88 in Vancouver, and it's a clinician, so a psych nurse, usually a psych nurse, that rides with a police officer, and they serve the people of the community of Vancouver. Surrey has a program called CAR 67. Richmond has a program called Fox 80. New Westminster Police have a program called the Mental Health CAR. I don't know. I know they don't have a CAR program, but they have just the mental health team. And then, so there's all these names all over the place. And when I started asking around, well, why did you call it this? Why did you call it that? No one was able to really give me an answer. And so when it came to naming the CAR program, we tried coming up with really clever numbers to include the communities that we're servicing, and the different agencies that are working together to work with those communities. But the more I dug into that, the more I realized that if we were trying to be too inclusive, we are then inevitably going to be exclusive of somebody. And what I mean by that is, if we wanted to expand up into the Squamish, the Sea to Sky area, we would have excluded them just by the name of our program. And so I eventually landed on car 22. It's certainly not a romantic number. It's certainly nothing exciting, but it's merely it'll be 2022 is the first full year of the car program. So that's why it's called car 22. And that way, hopefully 15 years down the road, when people say, well, when did the car program start? They'll be able to say 2022. So Bonnie, if you can get me to the next slide, please, that would be great. Yeah, thank you. So I officially changed the name to the Integrated Outreach Team, and I chose the word integrated and outreach team because obviously we do outreach in the community. Obviously that's easy. But the integrated portion of it was the integration of the RCMP and Vancouver Coastal Health. And I chose integrated because I knew that my grand scheme, my grand plan was to also include the West Vancouver Police Department as an integrated unit, as well as IFNU, which is the Integrated First Nations Unit, which is the policing team that works within the walls of the North Vancouver RCMP that serves the First Nations communities that we have here in the North Shore. So that's why I chose that name. This past year, I've really focused on trying to operationalize things and formalize things. So part of that is writing a standard operating procedure document so that our constables that are on our team know what their roles are. Our dispatchers know what their roles are. Our supervisors know what their roles are. Our clinicians know what their roles are when we're out in the community. It also talks about information sharing. How do we get around that? It talks about that. I've also written a trilateral MOUs. An MOU is a memorandum of understanding between Vancouver Coastal Health, the North Vancouver RCMP, and West Van Police Department. And that is a legal document that is before our legal team right now, and it talks about information sharing and how we work around that. I then started, well, ever since I joined the team, I heard more and more from our community members, families of people with lived experience, and our community partners, asking if we can show up to do an assessment, not in uniform. Can we show up not in our uniform? And so I had to ask a lot of questions as to what that's about. Like, what is it about the uniform? Is it the use of force options that are on the belt? Is it the yellow stripe? What is it what was it about the uniform? And the more I spoke to people and heard what their concerns were, the more I realized that we should at least explore the option of changing our uniform. Now you can understand this is not something that is easily done within the RCMP. The RCMP, as you know, is steeped in tradition. It's an incredibly slow-moving beast to make any change happen. And we've seen that time and time again in the media with how long things can take for the RCMP to change. But I kind of took there's a Vision 150. They call it the Vision 150, and part of their language is modernizing the police force. And so I used some of that language to make the case for why we needed to explore modifying our uniform. So I didn't want to just go into it haphazardly. So I engaged Catatonia University, and I asked them, there was some first-year students, and I asked them for an academic study on the impacts of police uniforms on vulnerable people in the community. And so their study supported that actually a uniform is actually very important for the people in the community and vulnerable people in the community, because it's an identifiable thing. For some people, it can be triggering and traumatizing, fine, but for a lot of other people, it speaks about safety, and they feel that they can kind of open up and they can share and they can tell you things, and they know that you're there to help them. So they said an identifying uniform is important, but they said that a modified uniform, something that's a little bit less formal, something that is either softer colors or not as military looking, because our uniforms, policing uniforms, have gotten more and more military looking with the more and more equipment that we must carry with us at all times. And that's not just use of force options and handcuffs and that sort of thing. We have to carry naloxone kits, we have to carry tourniquets, we have to carry radios, we have to carry cell phones, we have to carry all of these other things, and eventually body cameras that a lot of policing agencies are having to wear. And so all this stuff needs to be carried somehow. So they've moved to an external vest, a soft body armor external vest, which carries a lot of that load. But unfortunately, when you start piling all these things on these external vests, we look very military. And so their study suggested that uniforms are important, but a more modified, toned down uniform is a good idea. So I took that and I changed the uniform. So instead of wearing the regular gray shirt with the body armor vest over top, and then the blue pants with the yellow stripe, I modified it to just regular blue pants, no yellow stripe, and then a polo style shirt. So if you think of a golf shirt, you know, a typical collared shirt with 3 buttons here sort of thing, with a small crest on the chest that says police and integrated outreach team, it says police on the shoulders, and then does say police across the back. And that way, if I'm walking through a crowd and somebody sees a gun on my hip, no one's calling me in as a guy with a gun, right? They'll see that I am a police officer. I still have to be identifiable. And the study suggested that we have to be identifiable, that and so we're not trying to hide the fact that we're police officers. We're trying to show in the uniform that we are a different type of police officer. We're not necessarily here to enforce the laws, although we certainly can. That's not what we're here for. We're here to more of a wraparound care, a community partner. We're here to support people and help people. So that's the uniform that we chose. That's the uniform that our team wears right now when they're out with a clinician. And then in the fall season, I had third-year CapU students conduct a survey on the efficacy of that uniform change. So did we do enough? Did we meet the standards? Did we get to where the public wanted us to? And all we did was very simple. We took a photograph of our new uniform, so a police officer in the new uniform, the same police officer in the regular uniform with the external body armor, that same police officer in the regular uniform, but with an internal body armor, so your vest is worn inside, so it doesn't look paramilitary. So that's the three different types of uniforms. And then the final thing was jeans and a hoodie. And the results that we got back supported the fact that the polo style shirt with the blue pants, the uniform that we changed to, was the more favorable uniform, not by a ton, but it was certainly more favorable than the other uniforms. And close second was no uniform at all. So jeans and hoodies was a close second, but the modified uniform was the number one. And so I have that data. So if anybody from Ottawa calls me up and says, how on earth did you change this uniform? I can show the metrics and the numbers that we did. I've been working closely with VCH I've been at the job now for 3 years. So since those 3 years, I work closely with our VCH partners, and I've been asking and asking and asking for more resources and more clinicians to be out with us. What we did was we had an ad hoc approach to it. So it would be, I would call up the community psych services at the Hope Center, and I would ask their manager if I could have one of their clinicians for the afternoon, because I needed to go and do a couple of visits in the community, or she or the clinicians would call us and say, hey, are you able to go out with us this afternoon? Because we need to visit somebody in the community. So we did an ad hoc approach. The problem with the ad hoc approach is that there was really no way of capturing the data. We were doing all this excellent work, but there was nothing formalized. So then I was able to finally get the VCH to support us with one afternoon, or like one day. So Tuesday I think it was from 9 until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. So essentially 6 hours. And once you take an hour off for lunch, it's about 6 hours of time per week, one day per week. And with that, we created a daily log sheet so we could keep track of all the work that we did. And then we could show my senior leadership team and the senior leadership team at Vancouver Coastal Health all the work that we were doing. But more importantly, at the bottom of that log sheet was deferred work, the amount of work that we were not able to accomplish on that day. And that deferred work was a big piece. That was a big piece of it. It just spoke volumes to the fact that we need more and more resources. So last year, they finally got the Ministry of Health knocked on the doors of all the health authorities and said, here's a bunch of money. We want you to focus on homelessness and substance use disorders. and write a proposal as to what you needed or what you want to do with the money. So I worked closely with a couple of directors from Vancouver Coastal Health in writing a proposal for the CAR program where we could serve the community. And, you know, obviously, since substance use disorder falls under the DSM-5, it is a mental health issue. And we can take the clinicians out with us to the people in the community, where a lot of people are either homeless, they're living in tents and bushes, or they're precariously housed, living in the shelters that we have. So we can bring the healthcare services to them. And so we wrote the proposal, we waited, we got funding, and then we eventually hired, or Vancouver Coastal Health eventually hired the very first clinician to ride shoulder to shoulder with us. And her name is Alyssa, and she started in November for the CAR program. Alyssa is a part-time clinician. You'll see this on one of the next slides. And she works Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and she works 12 to 8. And so that started in November. And we did kind of a soft open. We didn't want to make too much of a splash about anything because we were still cutting our teeth. We were still working out the kinks. We were still working out the bugs. And we were kind of worried that if we open up the floodgates, then we would have too much that we couldn't take it all on. Plus, we were waiting to hire a second clinician. So we only had a clinician for 3 days of the week, and they were in the process of trying to hire a second clinician so that we had coverage for 6 days a week. So in the first rollout in November, we were able to incorporate West Vancouver Police Department. So we have a police officer that they ride with the clinician 1 day out of the week, and that's Tuesdays. They ride with the police officer on Tuesday. So that's West Van's day. So, but an example today, for example, the West Vancouver police officer was with a clinician, and we had a file that was happening in North Vancouver, and we needed their help, and they were listening to the radio, and they said, "Hey, do you want us to go and help with the assessment in the community?" And I said, "Yes, that would be fantastic." So we don't worry about borders. We don't worry about geography or borders. We can cross borders. Their police officer can cross into our area. We can cross into the area. So if there's something that's happening and it's of high importance, then we'll go if we're working. And then the next step, once the phase 2 is to include the integrated First Nations unit. And so we are just in the early stages of talking to them right now to find out what's the best fit for them. We don't want to tell them what they need, because we don't know what they need. We need them to let us know what it is that they want from us, and if we can fill that void for them, if there is a void. Yeah, so there you go. So Bonnie, if we can have the next slide, please. Thank you. So the integrated outreach team, it's made up of myself and Constable Bromby, Patrice Bromby. She's my partner right now. And we have a vacancy that we're trying to fill. And so that vacancy, that posting is closing tomorrow. And I know of 2 people that were filling out applications for it today, and I know 3 others were asking questions about it. So hopefully we'll have a selection to choose from to hire the next police officer that'll be riding with us. So it'll be myself as a corporal and then 2 constables on my team. West Vancouver Police, they have Constable Good Murphy. Constable Good Murphy, you may know that name because he's also the media relations police officer for West Vancouver Police. So anytime there's a story out of West Vancouver, it's Kevin Good Murphy is the police officer in front of the camera for the most part for West Van. And so he's the media relations guy, but he's the mental health police officer for West Vancouver. Unfortunately, we're losing Kevin, and it looks like we're going to be getting Constable Nicole Braithwaite. That's not set in stone yet, but it looks like that's where it's going. So Constable Nicole Braithwaite is going to be part of our team. So she'll be the police officer for West Vancouver that's going to be handling the mental health files. And she's great. If you know of her, she's involved in the community at multiple different levels. The canoe journeys with the First Nations group. She puts together runs. She rode in the Cops for Cancer ride last year with me. So she's heavily involved in working with the community. So she's going to be great. As mentioned earlier, we have 1 psych nurse that works with us, and that's Alyssa. And she's fantastic. Like when I heard, I know Alyssa, I've worked with Alyssa. She was with the housing team at Hope Center. And when I heard that Alyssa was applying, I was like, you mean Alyssa? Like my Alyssa? She's awesome. Because she's just, she's got a great way about her. She's very pragmatic, but she's very caring, nurturing, but she's very direct, to the point. She has a great sense of humor, and she's filling in this role very, very well. So we're very happy to have her on board. And she works Monday to Wednesday from 12 until 8. And then we're just in the process of training a new clinical counselor. So that's Katie. And so Katie's going to be working Thursday to Saturday, 12 to 8. So as of next week, so this week is the last week that we're training Katie. So as of next week, we will have full coverage Monday to Saturday from 12 to 8. You know, so we're very excited about that. It's been a long time coming. And as soon as we have that up and running, then we'll have the capacity to bring the Integrated First Nations team on board. And my goal there is to give the Integrated First Nations team 1 day out of the 6, West Vancouver Police 1 day out of the 6, and then us, the North Vancouver RCMP, will have 4 days out of the 6. And that's mostly because of file load. Our file load is far greater than West Vancouver's and far greater than what the Integrated First Nations team has. But again, there are no borders. So if Patrice is riding with Alyssa on Monday and it's not the day to be in West Vancouver, they'll focus their efforts in North Van. But if there's something happening in West Vancouver, if there's something happening on Squamish Nation land and it requires a clinician to go, then they'll go, and there's no issue with that. So Bonnie, the next slide, please. So what do we do? Yeah, I mean, that's, you know, what do we do? So at the very beginning of a day, we'll sit down and Patrice or Kevin will sit down with Alyssa or Katie, and they will review files, and they'll review names that have been referred to them by other police officers and healthcare clinicians. And when they're reviewing the files, they're looking at the history of the client, of the patient. They're looking at the history with regards to healthcare. They're looking at history with regards to police. And we're not sharing information that doesn't need to be shared, but we're looking at trends more. We're looking at trends. We're saying, oh, and I'll give you an example. We had one situation where there was somebody in the community that was not doing very well. And we were seeing a high number of calls for service to the police, but also a high number of calls for service within the healthcare system. So multiple visits to the emergency department. And so it became kind of a revolving cycle. But until our team actually sat down and started looking at stuff, when we can look at the trend of when the files started to increase for the police, we could say, oh, those files started increasing in September of 2020. They stopped going to therapy and they stopped taking their medications in June of 2020. So then we can see a trend. And then we look back further and we can find that when they were in therapy and when they were getting their medications, they were more stabilized in the community, and there was no calls for service to the police. There were very few visits to the emergency department. And so it allowed us to paint a picture, a more a fulsome picture for that we could supply some wraparound care for this person. So we were able to get back engaged with this client. We were able to gain some trust with them. We were able to get them back into therapy. We were able to remind them of how they were doing well in the community and how much more at peace they were within the community. And we were able to get them reconnected to the services and reconnected to the medications. And then we started seeing a decline in calls for service from the police, as well as visits to the emergency department. So that's kind of, paints a picture as to what we do. We try to establish a plan to engage the person in order to try to mitigate them going into crisis in future. Because when people go into crisis, it's just not good for anyone, right? It's not good for them. It's not good for their family members. It's not good for their peers. If the police have to get involved, that's not always a good thing. And if they're in crisis and they're going to the emergency department and taking up space and time in the emergency department, when really if we can keep them out of going into crisis, and I know that's not possible all the time, I get all that, I understand that, but if we can keep them connected to services, then hopefully we can help to manage that so they're not going into crisis. Obviously, we were kind of talking about this at the very start before some of you joined on. But we try to minimize the stigma and minimize the trauma of dealing with police. And part of that is through education. So what I say by that is it's my team is educating our police officers. And it's not that we're up there doing training sessions with them all the time and doing these talks or anything like that. It's just how we use language when talking about people living in the community. And I'll give an example. So I read a report the other day, and the report said that this individual was not accepting help or not willing to change, something like that. And so I had a conversation with the member that wrote that, and I said, this language is a bit blaming. It's assuming too many things. We don't know if they're not willing to change or that sort of thing. But a more gentler way of saying that is that this person is not in a place right now where they can accept help, or they're not in a place right now where they can make that change. And it's less blaming. So we use that kind of language, and it's interesting because we've been doing this now for a couple of years and using these kind of language and talking about how language matters. And so I'm reading reports now, for the most part, that are far more gentler in talking about people. And one of the other things, and I've learned this, is that people aren't suffering from schizophrenia or suffering from bipolar. They are living with schizophrenia. It's living with bipolar. It's not that they're suffering, and that to say that somebody is suffering is very judgmental. How do I know whether or not they're suffering with it? They're living with it. So that's what we do from an educational piece. We also assist our health partners with tracking people down in the community. And so if somebody is, if you can go back one slide, Bonnie, that'd be great. If somebody's in the community and they're on extended leave, so they're a certified patient and they've missed their injections or they've missed their appointments with their doctor, then they're recalled. And a lot of you on this call will know what that means. And a recall is they're just being called back by the doctor or the clinician to come back in for that. If you can go back maybe 2 slides there, Bonnie, that'd be great. Yeah, there we go. So a Form 21 is issued by the clinician, and then we can go and find the person. One of the other things that our team does is I got a Form 21 from a clinician, and the clinician wrote this person did not come in for their meds. We gave them 2 days to come in for their injection. They didn't come in. So we want you to go and find them and take them to the ER. And so I kind of looked at it and I thought, well, why do they need to go to the ER? What are they doing that requires them to go to the ER? And so I had a conversation with the psychiatrist about it. And the psychiatrist said, well, this person is somewhat uncooperative and doesn't want to come in for their injection. So I just need them to go through the ER. And I said, well, what happens if I go and talk to the person and can convince them to come in for their injection? Is that okay if we just bring them in to get their shot and then I can drive them home immediately after that? Do they need to be hospitalized? And the psychiatrist said, well, you can try, but that won't work. But yes, if you can make that work, then go for it. So I drove down, I met with the client and had a conversation with him. And I said, look, whether you agree with this or not, you have an avenue to fight this. You can go before a review panel and have that. But right now I'm bound to bring you in for medical care. I am bound by that. I cannot leave you. I said, so if you're willing to go in and get your injection, then I can drive you up there, get your injection, take you home. I can have you home in about 20 minutes. Or we're going to go to the hospital. We'll sit in the ED for an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 hours. And then who knows what's going to happen with you. Then you'll end up being admitted to the hospital or whatever. And I said, I don't think that's necessary. And so he agreed. And that's exactly what we did. I drove him up, he got his injection, and then I drove him home. So that's something that our team can do. And then we work with families when they are part of the care of the patient. And I have to put that in there, when they're part of the care of the patient, because sometimes they're not. And sometimes, the patient has a right to privacy and they have an expectation of privacy. And so we have to manage that. But we inevitably ask do you have some support people? Do you have support people in the community that we can reach out to and let them know where you are and let them know what's happening? And if they say yes, then we ask who, and then we'll reach out to the family. A lot of my day is spent on the phone with family members, trying to manage their expectations on what the police can and can't do, why the police do what they do, and you know, because not a lot of times, but sometimes families, they're desperate. They're desperate to get their loved one the support that they know they need and to get the care that they need. And so they say, can you not just go and take them to the hospital? And I'm like, I can't unless I have cause to do so. And so we manage expectations. So that's what we do. We'll move on to the next slide, please. So these are just some of the considerations, and this is not just with the CAR 22 team. This is police in general. We look at, you know, the history of the patient with regards to police interactions, but with having a clinician with us, we can look at healthcare as well. So as the example I provided, where we could look at the number of files and also the number of increased number of healthcare visits. Has there been an increase in police and healthcare visits, like the story I told? Is the patient asking for help, or is it a peer or a loved one? So, and that's a consideration, right? Because it's a lot easier if the patient recognizes that they need help versus what we were talking about earlier at the beginning here, when some of you weren't on the call. We were talking about people that don't have insight. And so it's the family members or their peers that are calling and reaching out and saying, I need, this person needs to go to the hospital, they need help. You know, has the patient been connected to services before? Was it helpful? Do we think that they had some peace in their lives because they were connected to those services? Maybe they didn't. Maybe those services weren't good, and maybe they weren't right for that person, or maybe they weren't right for that person at that time. We need to try to explore that, and my team has the time to do that, more time than, say, just a regular frontline police officer who is worried about the assaults and the 911s and the collisions and the domestics and all the other things. I don't need to worry about any of that. So I have the luxury of time to really drill into a patient and try to understand what makes sense, and then try to offer services for them that may be more for what they need at the time. Are they currently connected? That's easy. That's an easy one. If they are currently connected, that's a great one, because then we can say, okay, well, we'll call the caseworker and advise the caseworker that so-and-so was in crisis last night and got taken to the ED, or so-and-so was in crisis last night and the police went and were able to manage that and get some support to them. And, you know, the caseworker can reach out to them. Obviously, we've talked about this, what's been effective in the past, and then what are the expectations? So what are the expectations of the person calling us, whether that be a peer, a loved one, or the client themselves? What is it they want? Or a healthcare worker, right? So a healthcare provider will call us, and I'll have that happen quite often. I'll have doctors call and say, we have a patient and we need you to go and pick them up and take them to the hospital. And so one of the things I'll say to the doctor is, well, if you think that person needs to go to the hospital, then you can certify them yourself with a Form 4. And sometimes doctors, general practitioners, don't know this, right? They don't understand this. And so I humbly find myself sometimes telling the doctor what they need to do. When they say, you need to go and pick this person up and take them to the hospital, I say, if you think they need to be going to the hospital for a mental health issue, then you can certify them directly. If you have that information, do a Form 4, send it to us, and then we can act on the Form 4. And then that removes our own subjectivity, right? That removes that. If we can go to the next slide, please. So how do we get involved? I've touched on this already. Police officers will respond to files. We, as you saw, we work 8 hours a day, 6 days a week. So there's plenty of time. There's plenty of times when we're not working. So if frontline police officers are going to files and they're dealing with so-and-so in the community, they'll send us an email and say, hey, we went to visit so-and-so last night. They called because they were in crisis, or the family members called, blah, blah, blah. We didn't take them to the hospital. We didn't apprehend them under Section 20 of the Mental Health Act, or we did. We thought you should know. And so we'll go off of referrals from the police officers. We'll also get referrals from healthcare providers and partners in the community. So I've mentioned that before with doctors calling, but also community psych services will call us, Stepping Stones will call us, older adult mental health, the Foundry, Yurt, Carlisle Center, the list goes on. A Magnolia House, obviously the Hope Center. We work closely with the 4th floor as well as the 1st floor with all their services. CAR22, we work with clients, loved ones of people and with lived experience and their peers. So we get involved when clients reach out to us. We get involved when their loved ones reach out to us. We'll get involved when their peers reach out to us. So any one of those services will kind of bring us on board, or just our own knowledge of somebody in the community that we've dealt with on an ongoing basis. We may just proactively reach out to them and see how they're doing. So here's an important piece here. If you need a police response, meaning if you are in crisis, or the person that you're a peer for is in crisis, or your loved one is in crisis, and you need a response from a police officer, please do not call CAR22. I say this because we only work 8 hours. Well, our team together is only on 8 hours a day, 6 days of the week. So please, if you need a police response right then and there, please call either the non-emergency number for the North Vancouver RCMP, the phone number is there, or the non-emergency number for the West Vancouver Police Department. There's the number there. When you do call, you can certainly ask if CAR22 is available. And so you can say, my so-and-so is in crisis, or I'm in crisis, or I need support. Is CAR22 available to come and visit me or visit my loved one? We may not be available. We are very, very busy. And I say that not to hide behind the big wall of secrecy or anything. We have a lot of patients that are out there. We have been very busy. And we haven't even officially really done a big media thing, although we're kind of out in the media a little bit now. We are very busy. There's a lot of calls for service for us. So we may be tied up on a call already. But you can certainly ask if CAR22 is available to come. Obviously, it's 911. If this is an emergency, if it cannot wait, then obviously 911. And I always like to say, if you're wondering whether you should call 911, just call 911. Err on the side of caution, call 911. Again, with a 911, you can certainly ask if CAR22 is working. But normally what happens is that you'll call 911, the call taker will take all your information. They'll have a card, they'll have the dispatcher dispatch a police officer or 2 or 3, depending on what's happening. And then if we are working, if our team is on duty and we are not tied up with a file, we will hear that file and we will certainly go. But we will not be the first ones to the door because we have a civilian on board. So we need our frontline police officer to go in first and ensure that everything is safe inside before we can bring a civilian into the situation. We need to make sure it's safe. If you're looking for a discussion, if you want to bounce some ideas off of us, if you want to find out what resources are available, if you want to let us know that you're supporting somebody in the community and they need a certain response from the police, or if they're triggered by male police officers, it's better send female police, anything like that. If you want to have a discussion with us, then you can call us at that number that's provided there. So that's the 969-7333 number. That's the phone line for our mental health team. I'm usually at my desk, and so I have the phone usually not forwarded, so it'll ring, I'll answer it. Or if I'm not at my desk, I have it forwarded to my cell phone, or it's forwarded to Constable Bromby's cell phone. So one of us will usually answer, and if you get voicemail, it's just we're not available. So please leave a message, and when we are available and get back to that phone, we'll be able to retrieve those messages. Yeah, that's how CAR22 gets involved. So let's move on to the next slide. We're almost done here, I think. Yeah, so this is the summary. This is the end of it. So in summary, the police have partnered with Vancouver Coastal Health in a joint venture. It's called the Integrated Outreach Team, and the Integrated Outreach Team, one of their programs is the CAR22 program. That's kind of the language I'm putting out there. call the police, non-emergency numbers or 911 when you need a police response. So that's when you absolutely need a police officer to attend. Please make that call. Again, if you want to have a discussion about things, if you want to let us know about something, if you want to bounce some ideas off, if you would like us to come and maybe visit when we have some time, if you want us to come and visit your loved one when we have some time and maybe explain, I don't know, the law or something like that, we can certainly do that. Go ahead and call us at the 7333 number. Yeah, and we work, I mean, I certainly work more than 8 hours a day. I work 10-hour days, 4 days on, 3 days off, but that's irrelevant. Our car program is 8 hours a day, noon until 8, Monday to Saturday. And you've got your phone numbers there. That's my presentation, I think. I think that's the last slide. That's the last slide. Thank you, Bonnie. You were excellent. Can we call you Vanna? Were you Vanna there? You were an excellent Vanna, moving those slides through. That was excellent. So Bonnie, we can't hear you.
There we go.
There we go.
Thank you.
And the audience was fantastic. The audience was great.
They're very quiet, aren't they? Yes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I always find this very weird, even like we're 2.5 years into this bloody pandemic when we all started doing Zoom calls. I much prefer being live in a room and being able to work the crowd and walk the aisles and, you know, talk to people and read their energy. I find this all very odd, just staring at a screen. Yeah. I'm pretty animated, but I'm still sitting down. I'd much rather be moving around. So I hope that wasn't terribly too boring for you folks, and I hope that you got something out of it. Yeah, I think we're going to look at some questions now, Bonnie?
Yes, for sure. So I did see there was one question, and it's just wanted to know if you know to use humor when addressing someone with catatonia. Example, ask them to speak in a cartoon voice if they're scared, or if they're going to go unconscious, or if they're scared they're going to become unconscious, I guess. So I'm not really sure about that.
No, I'm so let's be clear. I'm just a dumb cop, right? Okay, I just want to put that out there. I'm just a dumb cop. I don't have a degree in psychology or anything like that. I don't pretend to know. Even I know maybe a tertiary level of what's in the DSM-5 and what to look for and that sort of thing. So what was the term?
Catatonia.
Catatonia. I'm assuming that means some sort of a catatonic state.
I guess. So
I guess. No, I didn't know that. I didn't know that. So whoever asked that, that's a very good thing. So it is for me to. I don't think I've ever come across in the 3 years I've been doing this. So that would be somebody that's completely blank, I'm assuming, not answering any questions. Is that what catatonia would be?
That is what catatonia is. So I guess,
interesting.
Yeah.
I am to ask them to speak to me in a cartoon voice, or am I to speak in a cartoon voice?
Yes, I'm not sure. Maybe she will put it back, some more information for us in the chat. Not sure.
Interesting. I love learning new things. This is really good. Thank you so much, whoever that was. Thank
you. Okay, any other questions? We have lots of compliments. Thank you, Neil. Very informative presentation. And
oh, great.
Here's a good question. Is the funding permanent?
Oh, good question. Yeah, you know what? That's a good question. That is, I don't have a clear answer for you. Here's my answer, and I don't want to sound like a politician. I'm certainly not a politician. This is money that was given to Vancouver Coastal Health, so I don't have control over those purse strings at all, except providing metrics and data as to why we need it, information back to Vancouver Coastal Health and their senior leadership team as to why it's important. So I don't have anything to do with it. The funding doesn't come out of our budget at all. It doesn't come from the city. The funding officially, the funding is only for this fiscal year, which ends end of March officially. But Katie and Alyssa have been hired as permanent employees. And the manager that did the hiring was advised that if you hire them as permanent employees, that more than it will certainly help to bolster the fact that this program is sticking around. If I was a betting man, I would say this program's not going anywhere. This is not, no one's going to shut this down, because I think there would be a lot of very upset people at the doors of the decision maker who didn't fund it.
Okay.
So there you go. That's my answer.
Thank you. There's another question here. Will it be expanded? So I guess if the funding,
good question. Good question. So an expansion, I mean, we could certainly go 7 days a week, and then we could do if we even just with 2 clinicians, if those clinicians were willing to work full-time hours, you could have an 11.25-hour shift. So that would be say from, it doesn't need to be any earlier than noon. The calls for service more come in the afternoon and into the evening than they do in the morning. So I think really the next thing would be kind of a 4-on 4-off rotation. That way we have 7-day coverage, and 11.25 hours would be great. But yeah, it really comes down to the workload. The file load is there for sure. That's not a question. It's really comes down to funding. So the manager at Vancouver Coastal Health said, wouldn't it be great if we could expand this? And I said, yes, let's make that play. Let's make that push. So I'm quite happy with the fact that when I started 3 years ago, we were doing it on the side of our desk at an ad hoc level, and I was able to move it forward to 1 day a week, and then finally we now have 6 days a week. It's taken officially 3 years of me being in that role. Not to say that I did everything; it wasn't me that did it all, but we kept pushing the ship towards that goal.
Awesome, thank you. Here's an interesting question as well. Was Vancouver Coastal Health Authority hesitant about the program or about the cost? Here in Coquitlam, we've asked Fraser Health for a CAR 67, but Fraser Health has rejected it for both Burnaby and Coquitlam. So instead, RCMP needs to respond to mental health calls with conventional police instead of a medically supported response like CAR 22.
Yeah.
So,
was Vancouver Coastal? The question was Vancouver Health, Vancouver Coastal Health resistant to the hesitant to the program?
Yeah.
I don't really know. I don't know what the I was just always told there's no money, there's no funding for it, there's no funding for it, there's no funding for it. No one ever said, we don't really think that we need that, or we don't want to spend any money on that because you guys are already doing it for us. There was never anything like that. They just always said there's no funding for it. There's no resources, there's no funding. So I don't really know what the discussions were behind the scenes. So I can't really answer that question. What I can say is the relationship that I have with the director. So the new director is Ira. Some of you may know him. He's the director of mental health and substance use for North Shore, I think Sea to Sky as well. He was the manager for the Hope Center. And we had an excellent relationship, and it's a relationship that I knew we needed to continue fostering and develop. And so basically anytime, I gave Ira my personal number. I needed him to know that I would do anything for him and his team, so that when we came to him and asked for something, we had already established that relationship. And it really worked out because Ira got this new role as the director last year, and that's when the funding came. And the funding from the ministry was for substance use and homelessness. And Ira found a way to craft it in such a way that we could develop this as a program with the police. So if we hadn't have had that relationship with Ira, there's a chance we would not have gotten that funding to do a CAR program. So Ira is a huge piece of this.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. If there's an issue with a person and it is when the integrated group is not on, exactly what will the police do? Is there still a VCH member to aid? So I guess
Yeah, so
Will-
the short answer to that is no.
No, right.
That's the short answer, and I'll kind of explain why that is. There is still that privacy piece, right? And so if just a regular frontline, I don't want to say regular, but a frontline generalist, so a general duty police officer, was at somebody's house and they called, I don't know, the Hope Center or the ER and said, I'm wondering if you can query a patient for me and look up their data and their records and stuff. The person on the other end would say, I don't think so. No, get a production order, get a search warrant. No, we're not, they're not going to share that information because they don't have that relationship, right? So one of the asks that, if you guys know that they're redeveloping the emergency department at Lionsgate Hospital, and part of it is to have a psychiatric emergency assessment treatment piece of it. So that's going to be a facility that is part of the ER, which is for psychiatric patients that are being brought in. One of my asks that kind of addresses that piece of it is to have a kind of a police-only phone line that our police officers can call, speak to a psych nurse that's working, and try to get a little bit more fulsome picture of the patient or the client that they're with, whether or not they're connected to services, do they have any upcoming appointments, are they titrating off of their meds, are we seeing an increase in files because they're decompensating in the community, what's their baseline? And so that's one of the asks. I don't know if we're going to get it. But ideally, if we could get it, that way our frontline members would have, or maybe our watch commander or a supervisor could call the ED manager or the psych nurse and get some more information about the patient. Again, not sharing, what meds are on or what diagnosis they're on, none of that, but just kind of a picture to look at. Maybe this is their baseline. Maybe what we're seeing is their baseline, or maybe they're really far removed from their baseline. And it could be a sign that they're decompensating, and we should probably act on that. So that's my answer to that.
Cool. Okay. Congrats on getting this launched. You were amazing help for our family in 2020. So I'm excited you have more resources to help.
Thank you for that. I don't get it right all the time. As I said, for 10 years, I chased bad guys. So I had a very hard, direct kind of approach, and I'm learning. I don't get it right every time, but I'm glad that we were helpful for you then.
Thank you. Is there any possibility or discussion regarding a relationship with North Shore PACT, Peer Assisted Care Team, through CMHA?
Yeah, so I mean, they're putting this thing out, the Peer Assisted Crisis Team. They've got it up and running. This is an excellent venue and option for people in the community. We have been at the discussion table with the Canadian Mental Health Association regarding PACT at the very early stages. We wrote a letter of support when they were looking for funding. We wrote a letter of support for the Canadian Mental Health Association for a peer assisted crisis team. We had our OIC, our officer in charge, so our chief of police, we had him sign this letter of support, supporting them for the funding. We are still at the table discussing things with them. What we're just trying to figure out is what that looks like, and how do we manage privacy issues and that sort of thing. So we're still working out those details, but yeah, absolutely.
Great. I hope this work expands to the rest of BC, funded by the Ministry of Health. I believe we would see a decrease in emergency room visits, RCMP and court costs, better service for community members. Hands raised and Thanksgiving to your team.
We hope so too. I just got a low battery on my laptop. Just give me a second. I'll be right back. I gotta plug in, otherwise we're gonna lose you.
Okay, all right. Yes, it's very good news to have both the PACT on the North Shore and this new CAR 22, where things are really looking positive. And I know that the person who put in the chat about the talking and the cartoon voice, thank you for the second part of that. I will let Neil know about that. It's very interesting.
I heard you. Give me a sec.
Okay, good. I'm saving it for last because it's good.
Okay, I'm back. I'm plugged in, so we're not going to lose you. But I did have to move closer to an outlet.
Okay.
What was the response for the?
Okay, you
voice?
want me to read that first? Okay, just a sec.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, all right, going back to that. Okay, so it would be to ask the individual to talk in a cartoon voice because it relieves stress and may prolong their ability to communicate. It happened to me and I talked like Barney because I knew I was going catatonic and it worked.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for that. That's very interesting. I had no idea. Thank you for that.
Yeah, that's really cool. Okay, so let's see. Here's another positive remark. You called me last summer when my daughter was in crisis. It really meant a lot to me. It really meant a lot because I was feeling very isolated and worried about her. It provided a ray of hope in a scenario of gloom. So that's terrific.
I'm glad. Thank you. And then I sit on the family advisory committee with my good friends there, and I've really been able to understand how challenging it can be to be a loved one of somebody with lived experience, and that a lot of the times you're not included in the conversation, and the healthcare providers cite privacy issues and that sort of thing, and I get it. I get all that, but the one thing that we try and do is we try to, anytime we're dealing with a client in the community, is we try to ask them, do you have support? Who can we call to let them know that you're struggling right now?
Mm-hmm.
And if we can get their permission, then we call. So we do try.
Right. Yeah. Every little bit helps, and these things are just so important in times of crisis. Let me just having a little trouble scrolling down here. I don't know why. Oh, okay. Is the Integrated Outreach Team another name for CAR 22?
Yeah, so officially internally within the RCMP, we are the Police Mental Health Intervention Unit. I mentioned that before. That's just, I don't like the word. It's too wordy. What are we intervening? I don't know. I don't like it. So we are the Integrated Outreach Team. And the program, one of the programs that we run is the CAR 22 program. So that's the language that we're using. So we are the Integrated Outreach Team, and that's an inclusive team. Within the RCMP, I head up the Police Mental Health Unit. And part of the Police Mental Health Unit is the Integrated Outreach Team, which now expands outside the walls, brings in VCH, West Van, Integrated First Nations Unit. And the program that we run in the Integrated Outreach Team is CAR 22. It's worded that way in case we bring on other programs. So we have a CAR 22 program. If we have something else, we can bring that on. I'm looking at different ideas. I shouldn't say, but I am looking at other ideas as well. I've got a list of other ideas that I want to do and implement, where it would be the Integrated Outreach Team is running the CAR 22 program. This program is the wording.
Thank you. And one of our members, somebody close to us, has written writing positive, and I don't think that this is necessarily to you, it's to all of us, but writing positive letters to RCMP Chief and Ira at Hope Center would add more weight to the great service the program is for our community. Yeah. Agreed.
When they say what impact do you have, I speak anecdotally a lot, right? Because how do you measure? Like if somebody calls me, if a family member calls me and I spend a half an hour on the phone with them, how do I measure that? How do I quantify that in a measurable metric that the impact that we had, either a positive or negative, but the amount of time that was spent on that? I don't know how to measure that yet. And so we talk about that anecdotally. We talk about the great work that we as a team are doing and the support that we have in the community, and we try to tell our stories. But if for sure, I would agree that if family members would reach out, both positive and negative, we're not going to learn if we don't know what we're doing.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
So any other questions that anybody has out there? Okay.
Yeah. Once again, I'd like to say thank you to everyone for allowing me to be in your space, whatever that is right now. Yeah, we're going to keep doing what we do, and we'll keep improving. And you know, if I've got other ideas, I've got other ideas where I want to include other agencies and other community groups, like the courts. Might be a small hint of where I want to go with it, but we'll see. Yep.
We have,
so thank you, everyone.
Maybe one last question. Will you talk at schools?
You know what? It's so funny that you brought that up, because I was just talking to our youth intervention team, the corporal that's in charge of that, and he was saying, he was asking about CAR 22 program for youth and that sort of thing. And I said, you know, it's if you want, I can do a presentation to the school board. I can do a presentation to all the you know, the principals and counselors of all the schools. We can do something like that. I can do a piece there. I don't know if I'm actually going to go to the schools and do it as a presentation, possibly. I haven't thought that far yet. The youth intervention team, our youth team, they do a lot of that stuff. So I kind of want to stay in my, you know, my neck of the woods. But I'm certainly open to getting the message out there for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Let me see. Oh, and maybe one of our last questions. How did the police get included in the Mental Health Act that created the police intervention? How did the police?
So I don't understand.
Yeah, just how did the police get included in the Mental Health Act that created the police intervention?
No idea. I don't know. So the Mental Health Act speaks about policing authorities, or authorities that are given to the police under the Mental Health Act. Long before I took on this role, I was not at that table. I don't even know if, I would imagine that the chiefs of police for British Columbia were part of those discussions, but I don't know. I always say that really there's a piece missing in the delivery of healthcare, and that piece is a mobile support unit that has crisis de-escalation people and psych nurses and psychiatrists and that sort of thing in a vehicle like an ambulance. I mean, they have their own transportation services. That's a piece that's missing. That's the piece that's missing, and they should be the ones that are going to these files, and because it is a healthcare thing, right? And isn't it odd that the police have been asked to take on a healthcare role? But we have, and we've modified our training. We've modified how we've done. We've implemented de-escalation training, and we've got training on various different mental health disorders or illnesses, and so we've taken all that on because we've been asked to be a part of it, and we're named in the Mental Health Act. But I don't know how that happened.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that answers her question. Helps to answer it at least. Yeah. So anyway, that's awesome. Okay. One last. Nope. That's it. Just thank yous and yes, as one of our leaders has said, we've been advocating for this for a long time. So we're super happy, as I told you about 10,000 times earlier.
Yeah, we're very happy too. It's been great. There's so much left to do. There's so much left to do, but I feel as though this has been like a check mark and say, okay, good, we got it going. Now we just have to keep it going and expand even further. So once again, thank you to Pathways. Thank you, Bonnie. I think Amy's still around somewhere in the background. Thank you very much, Amy. But thank you to Pathways for being friends of ours and advocates of ours in the community and supporting us going forward. And thanks for everybody to be on the call here.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you everybody for coming. And I think if you've seen Amy's little note in the chat, if you could please fill in the survey, that would be awesome. It really, really helps us. And if you don't have time, that's fine, but we'd love it if you can. So thank you very much for coming.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Yeah. Good night, everyone.
Bye.